Samantha had always believed that life could be simple if you made the right choices. She had built her life carefully, step by step, always moving forward with purpose. Her job was fulfilling, her friends supportive, and her apartment cozy, though it felt like a stage set for a different kind of life, one that wasn't quite finished yet. She had her plans, her routines, and a future that seemed certain. But lately, something had shifted, and that something had to do with two men. The first was Alex. He was everything Samantha had once imagined her life could be. Secure, steady, and full of potential. A successful lawyer with a growing firm, Alex's ambition matched Samantha's own, and together, they made sense. He was reliable, always thoughtful, always present, and he made her feel like the world was solid, like she could trust the foundation they were building together. With him, Samantha had a sense of control over her future, a calmness that soothed her, a quiet certainty. But then, there was Ryan. Ryan was a whirlwind, a stark contrast to Alex. An artist with no clear path, Ryan lived in the moment. He had an unpredictability about him that was both thrilling and terrifying. Samantha's time with Ryan felt like a dream, an adventure, a constant spark that kept her awake at night. With him, every day was a possibility, every hour a new direction. Their conversations were filled with passion, their nights endless and intoxicating. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Samantha felt herself drawn to Ryan's intensity, but she couldn't deny the security that Alex provided. She was torn between the idea of a stable, predictable life and the pull of something more, something that made her heart race and her mind spin. The more time she spent with both, the harder it became to make a decision. Was she ready to trade the thrill of uncertainty for the comfort of stability? Every decision she had made in her life up until now had been careful and calculated. But this felt different. The more she interacted with Alex, the more she understood the depth of his commitment, the certainty he could offer. But when she was with Ryan, she was consumed by emotion, unsure if that was enough to build a future. The clock was ticking, and Samantha knew she had to choose. But with each passing moment, the decision became harder and harder to make. She didn't want to lose either of them, yet each choice seemed to demand the other one's absence. As the days passed, Samantha found herself spending more time in a fog of indecision. Every encounter with Alex left her feeling grounded, yet strangely detached, as if something vital was missing. She enjoyed their evenings together, dinners at cozy restaurants, walks in the park, quiet moments spent discussing their plans for the future. But each of those moments also felt like a reminder that the life they were building was predictable, safe, and for someone who had lived so much of her life within the lines, that security should have been enough. But then came Ryan. With Ryan, everything felt spontaneous, raw, and impossible to predict. He would text her in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, asking her to join him at a concert or to grab a last-minute flight to a city neither of them had visited before. Time with him was electric, full of laughter, passion, and creativity. He made her feel like anything was possible, like she could step outside the neat, organized world she had built and embrace something entirely new. But his instability was impossible to ignore. His career, if you could even call it that, was unpredictable. He had no steady income, no clear path, always chasing the next creative endeavor. She admired his passion, but a part of her feared what that meant for the future. Was she willing to risk everything for the unknown? Could she trust a man whose life was constantly in flux? As Samantha sat alone in her apartment one evening, her phone buzzed with a message from Alex, asking her to dinner at their usual spot. She stared at the screen for a moment, her finger hovering over the keys. He had a steady job. He wanted to get married one day. He spoke of children, of building a family together. But Ryan had been texting her, too, asking her to meet up for an impromptu trip. Her heart raced as she realized that each man was pulling her in opposite directions. Alex offered a life of comfort and security, while Ryan gave her the freedom to embrace the unknown. But which path was right for her? Samantha found herself paralyzed, unable to make a decision. Each choice felt like a step away from the other, a loss she wasn't sure she could bear. The weight of indecision pressed down on her chest, and she found herself wondering if the fear of making the wrong choice would end up dictating her future more than the men themselves ever could. Samantha's life had become a series of decisions, each one more difficult than the last. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt at peace. The weight of the choices she had to make hung over her like a dark cloud, threatening to rain down at any moment. She had tried to focus on work, on spending time with friends, but her mind kept drifting back to the men in her life. Alex, the safe harbor. Ryan, the exciting storm. It was during a quiet Saturday afternoon that everything started to feel like it was building towards something inevitable. Samantha had decided to meet Alex for coffee, hoping to clear her mind. They sat at a small table by the window, the sun casting a soft glow across his face as he spoke about the latest project at his law firm. He was passionate about his career, and there was no doubt that he had worked hard to get where he was. "I've been thinking," Alex said, taking a sip from his cup. "I know we've been together for a while now, and I really want to take the next step. I'm ready to build a future with you, Sam. You're the one I want to spend my life with." Samantha felt her heart flutter at his words. He was steady, sure of himself, and she knew that with him, she could have a life built on trust and security. But at the same time, she felt a pang of something deeper, a fear, an emptiness that she couldn't quite define. She wanted to be with him, but she wasn't sure if the life they would have together would be enough to fill the space inside her that had begun to ache. "I'm not sure what I want yet," she said, her voice shaky. "I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads, Alex. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this." He looked at her, his brow furrowing with concern. "What do you mean? We've been talking about this for a while. You know I want to build a life with you." "I know," Samantha replied quietly, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her coffee cup. "But I feel like there's something missing. I'm not sure if it's just me, or if it's this relationship, but I don't know if I'm ready for this." There was a long silence between them, an uncomfortable stillness that made Samantha feel more uncertain than ever. Alex took a deep breath, his expression softening. "Sam, if you're not sure, that's okay. But don't make decisions based on fear. You deserve to know what you want. I want you to be sure when you're ready to take that next step." Samantha didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she could be sure. She didn't want to hurt Alex, but she couldn't ignore the tug of her feelings for Ryan, the uncertainty that had taken root in her heart. As they finished their coffee, Alex stood and kissed her on the cheek. "Take your time," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But just know that I'm here when you're ready." Samantha left the cafe that afternoon, her mind swirling. She couldn't deny what Alex had said, but at the same time, she knew that the answers she sought weren't just about what Alex wanted. They were about what she needed, what she was willing to sacrifice, and what she was still searching for. That night, Ryan texted her, as he often did, asking if she was up for an adventure. They'd made plans to meet at a new art exhibit opening in the city, but this time, Samantha hesitated. She had told herself that she needed time to think, but her mind was clearer now than it had been in a long time. There was a part of her that longed for the rush Ryan brought into her life, the unpredictability, the passion, the sense of freedom. But as she stared at her phone, she couldn't help but wonder, was she looking for excitement to fill a void? Or was there something more to it? Was she looking for a future with Ryan? Or was she just escaping the reality that she wasn't ready to settle? The choices ahead of her felt even more complicated now, and the questions inside her head grew louder with every passing minute. Samantha spent the next few days in a haze, constantly shifting between moments of clarity and confusion. She couldn't shake the feeling that both Alex and Ryan were pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together, yet she couldn't bring herself to make a decision. It was like she was standing at the edge of something big, something life-changing, but she couldn't bring herself to take the leap. The pressure built inside her. She tried to fill the void with work, with time spent catching up with friends, with little distractions that kept her from facing the truth. But the truth kept pulling at her, gnawing at the back of her mind, forcing her to confront what she had been avoiding. It was a Tuesday evening when the moment of reckoning came. Samantha had finished a late meeting at work and decided to take a walk to clear her head. The city streets were quiet, and the air had a cool, crisp bite to it. As she strolled along, lost in thought, she turned a corner and almost bumped into someone. "Whoa, sorry," she exclaimed, her voice apologetic, but when she looked up, she froze. It was Ryan. His eyes lit up with a mischievous spark when he saw her, and the tension in her chest immediately loosened. He wore that same effortless confidence, the kind that made everything feel like an adventure, even the most mundane of moments. "Samantha?" Ryan's voice was warm and familiar, like a song she hadn't realized she missed. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to mask the surprise in her voice. She had expected to see him, of course, but she hadn't expected it to be this way. Unexpected, raw, unplanned. Just like everything else with Ryan. He grinned, his dark hair falling slightly over his eyes as he shrugged nonchalantly. "Same as you, I guess. Trying to figure things out. Thought I'd take a walk." For a moment, neither of them said anything. It was as if the whole world had paused, giving them a moment to breathe, to feel what was between them. Samantha could feel the familiar pull of desire, the sharp wave of emotion that always accompanied his presence. "I didn't expect to run into you tonight," she said, her voice softer than she had intended. "Fate has a funny way of working, huh?" Ryan said, stepping closer. "You look like you're deep in thought. What's going on?" Samantha hesitated, her heart racing. She wanted to tell him everything, how she was torn between him and Alex, how she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing in her life, how she didn't know which path to take. But instead, she simply nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She was afraid of what would happen if she said too much. "I've been thinking a lot," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore." Ryan studied her for a moment, his face serious now, no trace of the playful spark that usually dominated his demeanor. "You know, you don't have to have it all figured out right now. You can take your time." Samantha felt her chest tighten, the words both comforting and terrifying. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her even more now, but she didn't know if she was ready to carry it. "I know," she said softly, meeting his gaze, "but time feels like it's running out." Ryan took a step back, his eyes softening as he smiled at her. "Then we'll make more time. For now, why don't we just walk for a bit, clear our heads?" It was a small gesture, but it felt like the first real decision Samantha had made in weeks. She nodded, and they walked together, the silence between them comfortable, familiar. As they strolled down the dimly lit streets, the city around them seemed to fade into the background, and for a brief moment, Samantha allowed herself to simply exist in the moment. But the truth was still there, lurking beneath the surface. The choice was coming, and she could feel it, closer than ever before. What would she do when it finally arrived? The days blurred together in a haze of indecision, and Samantha could feel herself growing more restless with each passing moment. She had taken Ryan's advice to heart, and for a while, she had allowed herself the space to breathe, to step away from the pressure of making a choice. But even the quiet moments of reflection only seemed to deepen her confusion. The more she tried to understand what her heart wanted, the more entangled her emotions became. Alex had been patient with her, as he always was. He'd given her space, respected her need to think things through, but Samantha could tell that his patience was wearing thin. Every time they spoke, she could sense a growing distance between them, an unspoken tension that seemed to say, "You have to make a decision, Sam. You can't keep going like this." Meanwhile, with Ryan, things had only become more complicated. Their time together was intoxicating, but each meeting left her more torn, more unsure. His presence made her feel things she hadn't felt in years: desire, passion, excitement, but also fear. Fear of losing herself in the whirlwind of his life. Fear that, in chasing after this intensity, she would lose the calm and stability that Alex provided. Samantha tried to ignore the nagging voice in her head, the one that told her she had to choose. But every time she saw Alex, she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. And when she was with Ryan, she was consumed by a sense of urgency, as though time was running out, as though she had to make her decision right then and there. It was on a quiet Friday evening that the breaking point came. She was sitting in her apartment, scrolling through her phone, when she received a message from Alex. "We need to talk." Samantha's heart sank. She knew what it meant. She could feel it in her gut. He was ready for a commitment, ready to take the next step, and he was asking her to make a choice. It was the moment she had been avoiding, the conversation she had feared. At the same time, Ryan had texted her, suggesting they meet up at a nearby gallery for an opening. It wasn't a big event, just a small exhibit, but the spontaneity of it, the promise of something new and exciting, pulled at her like a magnet. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been more stark. She looked at the clock. Alex was expecting her in an hour. Ryan would be waiting for her in 2. For the first time, Samantha realized that this wasn't just about choosing one man over the other. It was about choosing the kind of life she wanted, whether she would stay within the safe, predictable world Alex offered or dive into the unknown with Ryan, where nothing was guaranteed except the thrill of the moment. Samantha felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. She had been avoiding it for so long, but there was no escaping it now. The consequences of inaction were becoming clear. If she didn't choose, she might lose both of them, because neither man could wait forever. The clock was ticking. Samantha needed to decide. She had to choose. Samantha stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, each one a tiny reflection of her scattered thoughts. The world outside was alive with movement, the hum of life continuing as usual, while inside, she felt frozen, locked in a battle between her heart and her head. She glanced down at her phone, the messages from Alex and Ryan still staring back at her. The decision that had seemed so distant, so abstract, was now staring her in the face. She could hear her heart beating louder than the noise of the city, and she realized, for the first time, how truly difficult it was to choose between them. With Alex, she knew what her life would look like: structured, secure, steady. He was ready to settle down, to build something solid and lasting. There was comfort in that. The promises of a future, of a life where she wouldn't have to worry about stability or uncertainty. But she also knew, deep down, that the passion she once craved was beginning to feel like it was slipping away. And then there was Ryan. Ryan, with his free spirit and unpredictable nature. Every moment with him was an adventure, a journey into the unknown. He made her feel alive, but he also made her feel vulnerable in a way she couldn't ignore. His lifestyle was chaotic, and while she admired his creativity, there was no certainty there, no promises, and that scared her more than she cared to admit. Samantha sat down on the edge of her bed, staring at the messages again. She wanted to run away from the choice. She wanted someone else to decide for her, but she knew that wasn't possible. She had to face it. Her phone buzzed again. Alex had sent her another message. "I just want to know if you're ready for this, Sam. I need to know if we're on the same page." She swallowed hard, feeling the pressure mounting. It was clear that Alex was done waiting, and she understood why. He deserved an answer, and she owed him that. But then Ryan's name lit up her screen, and her stomach did a flip. He was asking if she was still up for the exhibit. The spontaneity of it, the promise of a night full of unexpected moments, it tugged at something deep inside her. Samantha closed her eyes, trying to quiet the noise in her head. The clock ticked on. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The choice had to be made. She thought of Alex's steady hand, the way he always took care of things, the way he had a plan for everything. And then she thought of Ryan, his wild eyes, his unpredictable grin, the way he made her feel like the world was a canvas, ready to be painted with whatever stroke they chose. But in the end, the question wasn't just about them. It was about her. What did she truly want? Was she willing to trade comfort for adventure? Was she ready to embrace the unknown? Or did she crave the stability that came with a life she knew would always be steady? Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she thought about what she was about to do. She wasn't just choosing between two men, she was choosing the kind of woman she wanted to be, the kind of life she wanted to live. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she typed a message to Alex. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this, Alex. I think I need more time." And then, without hesitation, she hit send. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the answer she needed to give. Samantha's hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment longer before she typed another message, this time to Ryan. "I'll meet you at the gallery. I need a night to clear my head. I'll be there soon." The decision was made, at least for tonight. It wasn't a final choice, not yet, but for now, it was the step she needed to take to find clarity. She knew that she couldn't run from the decision forever, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a small sense of peace. Tonight, she would take the time to find herself again, to breathe, to feel the world without the pressure of making a choice between two paths. As she grabbed her jacket and headed out the door, she didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, she was okay with not knowing. Samantha walked through the city streets, her thoughts tangled in confusion. She had promised herself that tonight would help her gain clarity, but with each step, the weight of her decision pressed harder. When she reached the gallery, Ryan was waiting outside, his casual demeanor as inviting as always. He leaned against the doorframe, a cigarette dangling loosely from his fingers. "Hey," he greeted, a playful glint in his eyes. "Glad you made it." Samantha returned a weak smile. "I almost didn't." They entered the gallery together, surrounded by soft chatter and the hum of background music. Samantha's gaze flitted over the artwork, but her mind was miles away. She needed to clear her head, but the more she looked around, the more she felt lost in the overwhelming choice between Ryan and Alex. Ryan stopped in front of a painting, waiting for her thoughts. "What do you think?" I can't keep pretending I don't have to make a choice," Samantha admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Ryan turned to face her fully, his expression shifting to something more serious. "You've got to stop avoiding it, Sam. It's not just about picking one of us. You have to figure out what makes you feel alive." Samantha's chest tightened. She hadn't been sure how to answer, but his words felt true. The more she avoided making the choice, the more trapped she felt. Ryan wasn't pushing her, he was just asking her to decide for herself. And that was what she had been avoiding all along. "I don't know if I can live in the chaos," she admitted, the uncertainty in her voice raw. Ryan's gaze softened. "I'm not asking you to pick me. Just figure out what you need for yourself. What makes you feel like you're really living?" Samantha nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks, she realized that this wasn't just about choosing between Ryan and Alex. It was about choosing herself. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew it was time to stop pretending. They walked silently toward the exit, and for the first time that evening, Samantha felt the weight of the decision begin to lift, just a little. Tomorrow, she would start to figure it out, but tonight, she could breathe. The days after the gallery felt different. Samantha wasn't sure if it was the conversation with Ryan or the quiet moment she'd given herself to just be, but something inside her had shifted. The constant noise in her mind had softened, just enough for her to start seeing the choice in front of her with more clarity. It wasn't that the decision had become easier, far from it. But now, for the first time in weeks, Samantha could feel the tension beginning to release. The question that had haunted her for so long, whether she could have both the stability Alex offered and the wild excitement Ryan brought, had faded, replaced by something simpler. What did she want? She sat at her desk, staring at the screen in front of her, but her thoughts kept wandering. She thought about Alex's steady hand, his reliability, his calmness. With him, she could see a future, one where everything was planned, controlled. And yet, that calmness often felt like a cage, like it would slowly close in around her. There was security in it, but sometimes she wondered if she'd lose herself in it. And then there was Ryan. Every moment with him was an adventure, chaotic, intense, but full of life. When she was with him, she felt more alive than she had in a long time. But it was also exhausting. His world was always shifting, always unpredictable, and sometimes it felt like trying to hold on to something that was slipping through her fingers. Samantha let out a deep breath. The comparison wasn't fair. She wasn't choosing between two men. She was choosing the life she wanted to build, the woman she wanted to be. She hadn't fully figured it out yet, but she knew that the uncertainty she felt around Ryan wasn't just about him. It was about the fear of living in a way that felt outside her comfort zone, of taking a risk that might lead to something beautiful or something broken. Alex had given her the safety net, but Ryan had shown her what it felt like to jump, to fall freely into something that didn't promise to catch her. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside her. Maybe the answer wasn't about choosing one or the other. Maybe it was about finding a balance. Maybe she didn't need to choose a life of safety or chaos. Maybe she could find her own path, somewhere in between. The phone buzzed on her desk, breaking her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from Alex. "We need to talk. I think it's time we figure this out, Sam." Samantha's stomach tightened. She knew this conversation was coming, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. She thought about what Ryan had said, about figuring out what she needed, what she wanted, and she wondered if she were honest with herself, if she had been trying to find someone else's idea of happiness instead of creating her own. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she typed a simple response. "I agree. I'll be ready to talk soon." She wasn't sure what the conversation would bring or where it would lead, but for the first time, she wasn't terrified of the decision. She knew she still had time. She still had room to figure it out. And tonight, maybe, she would give herself the space to truly listen to what her heart had been trying to say. The decision would come, and maybe, just maybe, she was closer to finding her answer than she had realized. Samantha sat at the cafe, her heart pounding as she waited for Alex. She had spent the last few days reflecting, and now, she had to face the reality of her decision. The messages, the conversations, everything had led to this moment. When Alex arrived, he greeted her briefly and sat down. His usual calm was replaced with tension. "Sam," he began, "I can't keep waiting for you to make a decision. This can't go on forever." Samantha took a breath, her voice soft but firm. "I know, I've been avoiding it, but I can't keep pretending everything is fine." Alex's eyes narrowed. "So, what have you decided?" She hesitated before speaking, the words feeling heavy. "You give me everything I thought I wanted, stability, a future, but I feel like I'm losing myself in it. And I've realized that I can't just live for security. I need more." Alex's jaw tightened. "Are you saying this because of Ryan?" "Not just him," she replied. "With him, everything is different, exciting, but chaotic. It makes me feel alive, but it scares me. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that kind of life." Alex sighed deeply. "So, you're choosing him?" "I'm choosing myself," she said quietly. "I don't think I'm happy with what we have. I can't keep pretending." Alex stared at her, sadness in his eyes. "I can't give you what you want, Sam. I thought we had everything, but I can't make you feel alive." She swallowed, her throat tight. "I'm sorry. You deserve someone who wants what you want. I can't be that person." The silence between them was heavy, but Alex nodded slowly. "I understand." With a last, lingering look, he stood and left. Samantha sat there alone, the weight of the decision sinking in. It hurt more than she had expected, but as the door clicked shut behind him, she realized something. She wasn't just walking away from Alex. She was walking toward the person she needed to become. The days following her conversation with Alex felt like a delicate balance. Samantha had made the hardest decision of her life, but it didn't come without a lingering sense of uncertainty. She didn't regret ending things, but the silence after the storm was deafening. There was no more running from what she needed to face, herself. As the days passed, she allowed herself to reflect. She didn't reach out to Ryan right away. She knew he'd given her space, and that was what she needed. Her thoughts were scattered between moments of clarity and moments of doubt, but there was one thing that had begun to take shape, She had to rediscover who she was outside of any relationship. She had spent so long defining herself by the men in her life, by what they expected of her, that she hadn't stopped to question what she truly needed. Samantha threw herself into her work, spending long hours at the office. It was a distraction, yes, but it was also a way to focus her energy on something tangible. She spent her weekends with friends, reconnecting with people she hadn't seen in a while. They filled her life with laughter, but even in the midst of that, the question loomed. What was next? One afternoon, she sat by the lake, a place she used to visit often to think. The water was still, the sky a soft pink as the sun began to set. It was quiet here, just the sound of birds overhead and the occasional ripple of water. This was the first time in a long while that Samantha allowed herself to simply be. No pressure to make decisions, no constant worry about the future, just the present moment. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of the calm. It was a message from Ryan. "We need to talk. I'm here when you're ready." The message was simple, but it hit her like a wave. She hadn't responded to him yet, and now, the moment had come. She felt the familiar pull in her chest, an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in weeks. She missed him. She missed the way he made her feel alive. But there was still a lingering fear inside her. Was she ready to dive back into that world? Could she live in the uncertainty that Ryan brought? Or was she just running away from the stability she'd left behind? She stared at the message for a few minutes, wondering if she should reply. But instead, she put her phone down and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She didn't have to make any decisions now. For the first time, she realized that she could take her time. The world wasn't going to fall apart if she didn't answer immediately. And maybe that was the real lesson. She had spent so much time trying to make the right choice, trying to live up to others' expectations, that she had forgotten to give herself the space to simply exist. Maybe the answer didn't lie in choosing between Ryan and Alex. Maybe it lay in choosing herself, learning to live with uncertainty, and knowing that it was okay to not have everything figured out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Samantha felt a small sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't ready to talk to Ryan yet, and that was okay. She needed more time, but she was learning that taking her time was no longer something to fear. It was something she could embrace. With a soft sigh, she picked up her phone and replied to Ryan's message. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this yet, but I'll reach out when I am." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the answer she needed to give herself. She wasn't making any decisions today, and for the first time, that felt like enough. A few days after sending the message to Ryan, Samantha felt a change within herself. The weight that had once pressed down on her chest, stemming from her indecision, the need to choose between Alex and Ryan, had lightened. She realized that by taking a step back and focusing on herself, she had given herself permission to let go of the constant pressure to make an immediate choice. She had been spending more time alone, reconnecting with parts of herself she had neglected. Work, once her safe haven, now felt like a space for growth, and she found herself throwing herself into new projects, rediscovering her passions for creativity that she had put on hold for so long. There were still moments of doubt, of wondering what the future held, but now, those moments didn't carry the same weight. One evening, after a long day of work, Samantha sat on her couch, staring at the messages on her phone. Ryan's message still lingered there, but she hadn't felt ready to respond. She had started to realize that the choice she needed to make wasn't just about Ryan. It was about her future, her happiness. Ryan had been patient. He had given her the space she asked for, understanding that she needed to find herself again. But now, she realized that it wasn't about waiting for him to be ready or for her to be ready. It was about understanding what she truly wanted, without the pressure of having to choose one over the other. The sound of her phone vibrating brought her back to the present. It was a message from Ryan. "I understand, Sam. I won't rush you. Take your time. Just know I'm here whenever you're ready." A small, bittersweet smile crossed Samantha's face. He was giving her the freedom she had asked for, but the truth was, she wasn't sure if she was ever going to be ready to jump back into that world. She couldn't keep trying to build her life on someone else's terms. She needed to figure out what made her feel grounded first, before she could be a part of someone else's life. Samantha replied with a simple message. "Thank you, Ryan. I'll reach out when I'm ready." For the first time, she didn't feel the need to explain herself, to justify her decisions. She didn't have to know what the future held. She just needed to know that she was doing what was best for her. She put her phone down and leaned back on the couch, closing her eyes for a moment. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't about choosing between two worlds anymore. It was about choosing herself, learning to live without the constant pressure of making the perfect decision. Samantha had learned that the most important thing was to be true to herself. She wasn't running away from anything. She was moving towards something that was uniquely her own. The future wasn't uncertain. It was full of possibility. And for the first time, She was ready to embrace it, no matter where it took her. As the weeks passed, Samantha found herself slipping into a new rhythm. There were still moments of doubt, moments when she questioned whether she had made the right choice. But they became fewer and farther between. She started to realize that the pain of the decision wasn't as sharp as it had once been. In fact, it was slowly being replaced by something else: freedom. Samantha had always prided herself on being the kind of person who could make a decision and stick to it. But the reality of what she had chosen was different from anything she had expected. The silence after ending things with Alex, the space between herself and Ryan, was not the void she had feared. Instead, it was a canvas, blank and open, ready to be filled with new possibilities. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and staring out the window, she allowed herself to reflect on what had brought her to this point. She had been so focused on what others wanted from her, on the stability Alex offered and the chaos Ryan represented, that she had lost touch with what she truly needed. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the weight of anyone else's expectations. It wasn't just about moving on from her relationships with Alex and Ryan. It was about shedding the layers of herself that had been built by others, the parts of her identity that were tied to their desires, their needs. Samantha picked up her phone, ready to reach out to a friend she hadn't seen in ages. But as her thumb hovered over the screen, she hesitated. She realized she wasn't reaching out because she was lonely or because she needed validation. She was doing it because she genuinely wanted to reconnect with someone who had always been part of her life, someone who had no expectations of her. She smiled, sending a quick message. "Hey, how about dinner this weekend? It's been too long." For the first time in a while, she didn't feel the need to explain or justify. She was making choices for herself in her own time. She wasn't waiting for someone else to tell her what was best. As she sent the message, a feeling of relief washed over her. She wasn't waiting for a sign or for the perfect moment to arrive. She was moving forward, and that was enough. Later that evening, Samantha sat with a journal she had kept on and off for years. She opened it to a blank page and wrote, "It's time to let go of the past and embrace the unknown." She had spent so much of her life trying to figure out what the next step would be. Now, she was learning to simply trust that the steps would reveal themselves, one by one. She didn't need to force anything. She didn't need to have it all planned out. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from Ryan. "I hope you're doing well, Sam. No pressure. Just wanted to check in." Her chest tightened for a moment, but she took a deep breath before replying. "Thank you, Ryan. I'm doing well. I'm figuring things out." She didn't have to explain herself any further. The message was kind and simple, and that was all she needed to say. Samantha closed her eyes, feeling the quiet satisfaction that came with letting go. She didn't need to rush into anything, and she didn't need to keep running from the decisions she had made. What mattered now was the person she was becoming, one step at a time. For the first time in months, Samantha felt at peace. Samantha woke up to a new sense of purpose. The decision to focus on herself was no longer just a fleeting thought. It had become her reality. She had spent so much time thinking about others, trying to live up to their expectations, that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly live for herself. She started taking more walks, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. She began attending weekend workshops, exploring new hobbies she had put off for years. It wasn't about finding something to fill the emptiness. There was no emptiness to fill. It was about rediscovering the joy of doing things because she wanted to, not because they were part of a plan or expectation. One afternoon, while she was at a local art gallery, she found herself standing in front of a piece that spoke to her in a way she hadn't expected. The painting was chaotic, splattered with vibrant colors, each stroke a burst of energy. It was a far cry from the calm, structured life she had once thought she wanted. But standing there, she realized that this was what she had been searching for: freedom, spontaneity, and a connection to something greater than herself. Samantha smiled softly at the piece, her mind racing with the realization that she could be both. She could have stability in her own way, but she could also embrace the chaos. She didn't need to be defined by one or the other. She could create a life that blended both. The art gallery visit wasn't just a moment of clarity about the future. It was a reminder of how far she had come. Samantha had been lost in the expectations of others for so long, but now she was rediscovering who she was, without apology or fear. She was ready for whatever came next, but she knew now that it didn't have to fit into a perfect mold. It was hers to shape. Weeks had passed, and the weight that had once felt so overwhelming was now light. Samantha had spent so much time focused on finding a solution, on figuring out the right choice. But in the process, she learned to accept uncertainty. Her evenings were filled with new experiences. She had joined a writing group, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to try. She reconnected with old friends and even made a few new ones, discovering new interests along the way. It wasn't about filling the void. It was about allowing herself to fully experience life again. One evening, as she sat in a small cafe with a friend, the conversation turned to relationships. Her friend asked her how things were going with Ryan. Samantha paused, unsure of how to answer. She wasn't sure where she stood with him, but more importantly, she wasn't sure what she wanted to stand for. She realized that she hadn't thought much about Ryan in recent weeks, not in the way she had when she was constantly torn between him and Alex. Her focus had shifted. She was focused on herself, her own growth, and for the first time, that felt like enough. She didn't need to rush into anything with Ryan, and she didn't need to be afraid of what might happen. She had let go of the pressure of making the perfect decision. She was letting life unfold in its own time. When she returned home that evening, she picked up her phone. There was a message from Ryan, simple as always. Just wanted to check in. I hope you're doing well. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the need to respond immediately. Instead, she put the phone down and took a deep breath. She was doing well, and for the first time, she didn't need anyone else to tell her that. Samantha had come a long way from the confused, anxious woman who had struggled to make a choice between Alex and Ryan. Now, as the days passed, she started to feel more and more comfortable in her own skin. Her life was hers to design, and she was no longer afraid to live it on her own terms. One afternoon, while walking through the park, she saw Ryan. It had been weeks since they last spoke in person, and she wasn't sure how to feel about seeing him again. Her heart fluttered a little, but it wasn't the same overwhelming pull it had once been. "Hey," Ryan greeted her, his voice warm, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "Hey," Samantha replied, offering a small smile. "It's been a while." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, I've been giving you space. I get it. I just wanted to see how you were doing." Samantha's heart wasn't racing the way it once did when she was near him. Instead, there was a calmness that she hadn't expected. "I'm doing well, Ryan. Really, I've been focusing on myself, figuring out what I need." He smiled, his eyes softening. "I'm glad to hear that. You deserve it." For a long moment, they just stood there, the silence comfortable. No pressure, no expectations. Samantha felt no rush to make a decision, no need to place labels on anything. She could take her time. She had all the time in the world. "Thank you," she said finally, "for giving me space, for letting me figure things out." Ryan nodded, a quiet understanding between them. "Take your time, Sam. I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, Samantha believed him. She didn't need to rush anything, and the uncertainty that once terrified her now felt like a canvas she could fill at her own pace. She didn't have to make any more decisions just yet. For the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. It had been several months since Samantha had let go of the pressure to choose between Alex and Ryan. In that time, she had found herself, rediscovered her passions, and learned to embrace the uncertainty of life rather than fear it. The journey of self-discovery had led her to a place where she was finally content, not because everything was figured out, but because she had stopped waiting for answers to come from someone else. She had learned to trust herself. One quiet evening, after a long day of work, Samantha sat in her favorite corner of the apartment, the window cracked just enough for the cool breeze to drift in. She had made a cup of tea, a simple routine she had come to cherish, and she sat, savoring the moment of peace. She felt like she was living in the present for the first time in a long time, no longer distracted by the past or anxious about the future. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan, just like it had been several times over the past few months. "Hey, Sam, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. No pressure, but I wanted to let you know that I'm here, whenever you're ready." Samantha stared at the screen for a moment. There was no urgency in his words, no hidden expectation, just an open invitation. And for the first time, she didn't feel a rush to respond. She knew exactly what she needed to do. She didn't need Ryan to complete her life, nor did she need him to define her happiness. She had learned that happiness didn't come from someone else. It came from embracing the uncertainty, from building a life on her own terms, from accepting both the chaos and the calm. She wasn't looking for someone to save her. She was looking for someone to share in her journey. Samantha smiled softly, a sense of calm washing over her as she typed her response. "Thank you, Ryan. I'm doing well. I found my way, and I'm open to seeing where things go, but on my own time." She hit send, but there was no anxiety this time, no second-guessing, just clarity. The message wasn't a commitment, nor was it a rejection. It was an affirmation of her own growth, an acceptance that life didn't always need a clear path, but it could still lead to something beautiful. As she leaned back in her chair, a sudden thought crossed her mind. She had spent so much of her life trying to fit into expectations, to live up to others' visions of what her life should be. But now, she was writing her own story, one where she made the rules, and that was enough. Samantha stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She didn't know where the journey would take her next, and she was no longer afraid of the uncertainty. Life was full of possibilities, each one a step into the unknown, but one she was ready to take. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. Free to make her own decisions. Free to live life on her own terms. And as she stood there, looking out at the horizon, she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, she was ready for it. The journey ahead was hers to create, and that, more than anything, felt like home.